YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere? This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 11 2023 NFL predictions. Well, for the Fanatic this week, it was a good week overall. Another winning week of predictions. As this week so far against the spread and straight up, I went 9-4 against the spread through 13 games, and straight up I went 8-5. That equals 69.2% against the spread. And straight up, I went 8-5, which equals 61.5%. Definitely a very good week overall. Can hit that 10-win threshold, or was hopeful to hit that 10-win threshold. But again, who would have thought the state of Ohio would have beaten the Ravens? I'm sorry, who would have thought that the Browns and Bengals would have lost and won on concurring field goals? That knocked out two of the losses for me. And then the Saints-Vikings game was a fair choice. Objectively, that was a back-and-forth game. Derek Carr, Michael Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore. A lot of Saints left the games with injuries. Hopefully they're all okay. But it's still bad that the NFC South, through 10 weeks, has gotten exactly into the shape that it was last year. Even probably at an earlier point, the same point, where no team in the NFC South is 500 or is above 500 or 500 or worse. And this division, or divisions like this every year, and there's always one that sucks the life out of the entire conference of the league, there has to be a way of, I'm in favor of, and I'd love people's opinion on it, I'm in favor of reseeding. Because I think it is an absolute crock. The NFC South will get to host the best wildcard team from a division. And honestly, right now, you look at the Seahawks, the Cowboys, and the Vikings. Does anybody think the Falcons, Bucks, or Saints could beat any three of those teams right now? Objectively. Because I don't. I think that 4-5 game is essentially the equivalent of a bye week for the wildcard team. So in a way, getting that 5th seed, that's probably as good as getting the number 1 seed, in my opinion, because you don't have to play a competent team. But you get to play the NFC South. But those are that was a tough loss there. And then the worst game I had this week, though, was San Francisco-Jacksonville. I want to apologize to Niners Nation. That was an absolute thumping that you handed on the Jags, who looked like little baby meerkats and pretty fraudulent, or a bit fraudulent in my opinion, just because that's the third time this year at home they played an above 500 team, and I will tell you later in the video, it's not great, their numbers. So, kudos to San Francisco, though. Most complete game that I believe they have played since week 4, since week 4 when they played week 5 when they played the Cowboys, 42-10, absolutely dominant, fantastic performance. Purdy looked great. Debo looked great, and it kind of tells you, when the Niners have all their talent in a row, 6-0 when everybody's healthy. 0-3, different circumstances, different levels of blame, I feel like, for each person, each level of each side of the ball. But when the Niners are fully healthy and effective, that is, I believe, the second best team in the NFC, and arguably, I would say, the third best team in the NFL overall. Only the Chiefs and Eagles, I believe, right now are better than those two teams. But, so, those are how I got my 5 losses in Jets Raiders. Never believe in the Jets. Never believe in a Robert Saleh-led team. Never believe in light-skinned Todd Bowles. Once again, never believe in light-skinned Todd Bowles. But there's my little rant about the 5 losses straight up. But overall, for the year now so far, through 159 games, I am now 77-69-3 against the spread, which equals 52.7%. So my best year so far. Have a bit of a cushion now of the weeks to hopefully continue to improve. But if I gain a few more losses, I will take that as well. And straight up, though, 93-56, that equals 53% against the spread. Straight up, 93-56, 62.4%. Definitely, I held my percentages, which is okay, but I'm not thrilled with that. But hopefully I can improve to gain a bit of momentum to get to that 63-64 range by the end of this week. For the last 14-game week of this 3-week stretch of 4 teams being on bye each week, we're in the last one till the Thanksgiving holiday, where every team will once again be playing over the Thanksgiving break, which is fantastic. But let me get into my picks. So, on Thursday, from 2 disappointing, even though the best division of football will get to play on the Thursday night game of this week, and it's probably the best Thursday night game of the year, when the 5-4 Cincinnati Bengals travel to Baltimore to take on the 7-3 Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Cincinnati Bengals here plus 3.5, but I'm going to take the Baltimore Ravens straight up. And also, very quickly, the Atlanta Falcons, the Indianapolis Colts, New England Patriots, and New Orleans Saints are on bye this week. So if you had Bijan Robinson, Drake London, the Falcons defense, Young Oku, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Gardner Minshew, Colts defense, Matt Gay, Mac Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, Juju, Pats defense, Chad Ryland, Derek Carr, Jameis, Thomas, Kamara, Saints defense, Blake Groupie. If you have any of those players on your fantasy teams, bench them because they will not be playing this weekend. So very quick aside there, but get back to the picks. Once again, I have Cincinnati here plus 3.5, but Baltimore straight up. Then on Sunday, with no more international games, every game will once again be on from 1 moving forward. When the 6-3 Pittsburgh Steelers travel to Cleveland to take on the 6-3 Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns are 4-point favorites in this game, just like the other AFC North battle. I'm going to take the Cleveland Browns here straight up to win at home, but I'm going to take the Pittsburgh Steelers plus 4. Then the next game, when the 3-7 Chicago Bears travel to Detroit to take on the 7-2 Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are 9.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Detroit Lions here, minus 9.5, and the Detroit Lions straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-5 Los Angeles Chargers travel to Green Bay to take on the 3-6 Green Bay Packers. The Los Angeles Chargers are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me the Los Angeles Chargers here, minus 3, and the Los Angeles Chargers straight up. Then the next game, when the 5-5 Las Vegas Raiders travel to Miami to take on the 6-3 Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are 10-point favorites in this game. Give me the Miami Dolphins here, minus 10, and the Miami Dolphins straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-8 New York Giants travel to Washington to take on the 4-5 Washington Commanders. When the 2-7 New York Giants, or 2-8, when the 2-8 New York Giants travel to Washington to take on the 4-6 Washington Commanders. There we go, I finally got it right. When the 2-8 New York Giants go to Washington to take on the 4-6 Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders are 10-point favorites in this game. Give me Washington here, minus 10, and Washington straight up. Then the next game, when the 6-3 Dallas Cowboys travel to Carolina to take on the 1-8 Carolina Panthers. The Dallas Cowboys are 11-point favorites in this game. Give me Dallas here, minus 11, and Dallas straight up. Yeah, so definitely that's a very interesting, unique point there. 3 straight games, 3 10-plus point spreads, laying all the points on those 3 teams I just mentioned. In the next game, when the 3-6 Tennessee Titans travel to Jacksonville, take on the 6-3 Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Jacksonville here minus 6.5, and Jacksonville straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-8 Arizona Cardinals travel to Houston to take on the 5-4 Houston Texans. The Houston Texans are 5.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Houston here minus 5.5, and Houston straight up. Then the next game in the 4 o'clock window, when the 4-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to San Francisco to take on the 6-3 San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are 10.5-point favorites in this game. Give me San Francisco here to win straight up, but I'm going to take Tampa Bay here plus 10.5. Then the next game, when the 4-5 New York Jets travel to Buffalo to take on the 6-4 or 5-5 Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are 7.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Buffalo Bills here to win straight up, but I'm going to take the New York Jets plus 7.5. Then the next game, when the 6-3 Seattle Seahawks travel to Los Angeles to take on the 3-6 Los Angeles Rams. The Seattle Seahawks are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Seattle here minus 2.5, and Seattle straight up. And then in the Sunday night game, when the 6-4 Minnesota Vikings travel to Denver to take on the 5-4 or the 4-5 or 3-6 Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos amazingly are 1.5 point favorites in this game as of right now. I'm going to take in my only pure upset of the weekend. I'm going to take Minnesota here plus 1.5 and Minnesota straight up. And then in the Monday night game, in the rematch of last year's Super Bowl that just was played in February, probably the game of the year that maybe a certain pop singer will attend or not. Who knows? The 8-1 Philadelphia Eagles travel to Kansas City to take on the 7-2 Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are 2.5 point favorites in this game. Give me the Kansas City Chiefs here, minus 2.5, and the Kansas City Chiefs straight up. All right, it's time for my quick thoughts on each game. The Baltimore Ravens over the Cincinnati Bengals. Man, that Bengals-Texans game was definitely a shock. Because, in a game where the Bengals had won 4 straight, had played probably some of the most consistent football they have played all year, playing a Texan team that was spry and competitive and feisty, but nobody really gave the Texans a chance to win that game. Boy, did the Texans pull out a rabbit out of their hat and grind out probably their most impressive one of the year and one of the most shocking and disappointing outcomes for the Bengals this whole season. It was the first game for the Bengals with 2 offensive turnovers, which is kind of amazing, especially since they were Joe Burrow, fourth quarter interceptions, which kept momentum alive, even though throughout the game as well. One key thing that if people notice, 19 of Joe Burrow's 27 completions were for 10 yards or fewer. So basically, besides a couple big plays, the 2 touchdowns to Chase and Boyd, and a couple other plays to Trent Irwin, Chase, and Boyd on like 15-plus yard receptions, Joe Burrow and the Bengals could not move the ball that effectively through the air. I do want to shout out Cam Taylor-Britt, the second-year player. I forget at university, but Cam Taylor-Britt has had 4 interceptions in the last 5 games. I honestly thought that when he got that interception on Stroud at the end of the game, I thought the Bengals were going to be able to score and get the game-winning touchdown at the end in a sense that after the Chase touchdown, that made the game really close. But unfortunately, Tyler Boyd had the biggest drop of the game, which led to a tie, which led to the which led to the Texans being able to drive down the field and kick the game-winning field goal. Also, really tough day for Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, who gave up 465 yards. It's the most yards the Bengals defense the most yards the Bengals defense has given up since week 2 of the 2019 season. It was like 545 yards. That is absolutely dreadful for that Bengals defense. And the Bengals now have lost 9 of 11 games to the Texans. And look, where the Bengals can say they had a terrible loss, to use a great meme quote, the Baltimore Ravens said, at home against our former team, the Cleveland Browns, hold my beer, let show you how bad a loss you can have. The Baltimore Ravens are the 4th team in the Super Bowl era to lose after leading within the first minute and not trailing until the final minute of regulation. This was according to Elias from Jameson Henley, the Ravens reporting. And the Browns trailed the Ravens the Browns trailed the Ravens 40 seconds into the game and did not lead until the game-winning field goal as time expired. So the Ravens were in the lead for 59 minutes and 20 seconds. That is the most time trailing in a win since at least 2000. For the Ravens, it was a very tough moment. The Ravens were horrible on 3rd down against the Browns this year. 6 of 20 overall against that Browns defense. Fortunately, I guess for them, the first time they played Dorian Robert Thompson, who was a rookie quarterback that has no point right now being on the field. And for the Ravens, even though they keep their consecutive 100-yard streak of rushing yards per game, that was the lowest amount of rushing yards the Ravens have given up for this year at 107. They do want to say that, for the Ravens, they actually did get a defensive touchdown, which ended the longest active streak of one at 27 games. And when I look at this game for the Ravens, I am just going to take that the Ravens, usually when we have these tough losses, the very next week, we come out and we play a very good game the following week. Or we play well enough to win. When we lost to the Colts in overtime off a field goal, we played the Browns and smacked them around. Even that was during Thompson Robinson. The game after we lost to Pittsburgh in a game we shouldn't have lost to. We played Tennessee and we pretty much decisively won the game throughout the way, even though the score would say it was a one-score game. And I just think with the Ravens, if the Ravens understand how important this game is, due to the fact that there's only one divisional game left after this and at the end of the year, where that could basically either decide a division or a playoff spot, depending on how these teams go. And the Ravens have a very tough schedule moving on from this point. So the Ravens, I think, understand the importance of getting this win, sweeping the Bengals, and getting a win here. The Ravens are usually very good in prime time. And I just think, again, the Bengals, there's something about the Bengals defense that hasn't been as impressive or consistent, unlike the Browns defense. The Browns defense has been the best in the league, and it showed. And I think with the Bengals, I think the Ravens should be able to move the ball a little more effectively. And the Ravens have just shown over the last couple years, even with the Bengals being as good as they've been, that they always seem to play the Bengals a bit better. And I think the Ravens offense will move a bit better. And I think the Ravens defense, with some of the guys coming back from injury throughout the game, or offense being more effective, I think the Ravens get a crucial win based off that momentum over the last couple years. Could the Bengals win this game? Absolutely. The Bengals, this isn't the September Bengals. These are the November Bengals. This team has played pretty well. And last year at home, it came down to a game-winning field goal by Tucker last year. So by any means, I think that this definitely could be just like last Thursday's game, where I get the point spread right by a half point. But again, and that's what I'm kind of banking on. But I'm just going to take the Ravens, more desperate, understand the situation a lot better. And I think the Ravens have enough confidence and momentum and kind of anger that they can beat the Bengals, or a bit of a weaker defense, and just have a lot more questions they have to deal with compared to the Browns, especially defensively. So that's why Cincinnati here, plus 3.5, but Baltimore straight up. The next game, the Cleveland Browns over the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is one to where, look, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the weird enigma of the NFL. They are the first team in NFL history, just like last week, to go 9 straight games with being outgained in terms of offensive yardage, and they're 6-3. This is one of those things to where it's like you have basically this weird dichotomy of saying, well, you get outscored every week, or you run less plays, you run more plays, but we score enough to win the game. It's crazy. TJ Watt, I'm going to give him a quick shout out. Second most sacks through the first 100 games in NFL history. He surpasses his brother TJ Watt, so what a phenomenal family that is. Only Reggie White with 105 through 100 games. Only had more, and I don't think he's going to get 18 sacks over the next 4 games. I want to shout out Jalen Warren, who had a career high in rushing yards in his first 100-yard game, which was massive. And the Steelers' offense, for all the problems that they had, they scored on an opening drive on back-to-back games with 2 Najee Harris rushing touchdowns. And the Steelers, their big thing is forcing turnovers. When they force 2 or more turnovers on defense, they are undefeated. And Pittsburgh offensively, if they don't give the ball up, they are 5-1 without a turnover. And look, Pittsburgh-Cleveland in week 2, it was just like most of their games this year. Cleveland, I thought, was the better team throughout. And effectively, the first play of the game, where Alex Highsmith gets the tipped interception from Harrison Bryant that goes for a touchdown. Then the game goes on. Chubb gets hurt, but Jerome Ford runs admirably. The Browns are able to move the ball effectively, and the Browns defense stifles the Steelers offense, but it basically took a Deshaun Watson fumble that got him the second touchdown, and they won the game off of that. And they had the busted play with George Pickens running down the middle of the field, which was massive. And my thing is, where with the Browns, they have the number 1 passing defense in the league. They're at home this time, and they actually outgained the Ravens as an offense 125-53 in the fourth quarter. And that was, I think, that was basically the difference in the game. They were able to hold the ball and be more effective. And look, it's a home game. The Browns, over the last few years, have played the Steelers better at home. And I think Deshaun will play better. And I just objectively feel like the Browns, they have more going for them. Minkah Fitzpatrick being out is big, and I just don't think Kenny Pickett, he's gone 5 straight games without a turnover. I think he gets 1 or 2, and usually in these games where he commits a turnover or 2, either by fumble or interception, it does not end well, to where I think they've lost by 10 plus points in every game where he's had at least a turnover. And that's why I think the Browns win. Like, again, I do think the problem for the Browns will amass again, just like with the Ravens. The offensive line not having Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills for this game will be massive. Hopefully Dawan Jones, the 5th round pick out of Ohio State, can come back. But I think with the Browns, with their running game, and with Deshaun playing a bit better and being able to stay healthy, I think this Browns team at home uses that home crowd and plays a more effective game, and they're not going to turn the ball over as much. They turn the turnover touchdowns that basically were the difference. I think that Kenny Pickett has not really been able to effectively throw the ball. If they double team Pickens and have him try to use Deontay or somebody else, I think that'll be effective. And I think the Browns at home, understanding the importance of it, show that, it's kind of crazy where, like, on both teams, and I objectively believe this, for the first time in a very long time, you could actually make a point that TJ Watt and Myles Garrett both deserve to be in the MVP race, because I just don't see a quarterback playing that well. That you could objectively say, okay, Mahomes, Jalen, Lamar, Trevor Lawrence, William Lawrence, as I like to say on the show, William Trevor Lawrence, Tua. There are moments, and there are going to be moments in games where you're just not going to believe that, Myles and TJ have been the 2 best defensive players, but arguably the best players on their entire teams throughout this entire, season. So I think both those guys deserve to have MVP conversation in their name as well. So, but I think Deshaun will play better. I think they will protect the ball a bit more, and I just don't trust Kenny Pickett to not go another game without making turnovers. And I think Deshaun and them pull out this victory. Should be a great game. It should be an ugly game. The AFC North, the best division of football, we on full display this weekend. And again, I'm just going to go with the same pick. I'm going to take the home team just because I feel more confident in how the Browns defense has been playing and the Browns offense with Deshaun with fewer turnovers. But the other 2 teams will cover just because I think the Steelers defense, if they can get enough pressure, can cause havoc that will be effective. So that's why I like Cleveland here straight up at Pittsburgh +4. The next game, the Detroit Lions over the Chicago Bears. This is one to where, look, I'm going to give the Chicago Bears credit. That was the best defensive effort I have seen from the Bears the entire year. True, they were playing the Panthers, which isn't great. And the Panthers' offense is the worst and most inept in the league. But that was probably the best defensive effort I've seen from the Bears. And the best thing about it was, since the Bears have the Panthers pick, even if they won, that actually helped their draft pick status because it helped move it up to that number 1 slot. And I think it's probably the Bears to lose at this point, thanks to the Panthers being as inept as they are. I also want to shout out D'Onta Foreman. It's amazing if you look at how inept the Bears' rushing offense has been. D'Onta Foreman, through 10 games, has 4 of the 5 rushing touchdowns for the Bears this season. 4 of the 5. Roscoe Johnson, their other running back, who's been hurt and pretty much a ghost, he is the other rushing touchdown. All the other rushing touchdowns for the Bears have been by their quarterback on QB sneaks. So, also, I think it's key with the Bears. They're 3-0 this year. 2 games by Division II quarterback Tyson Bagent when they do not commit a turnover. So, if the Bears do not commit a turnover offensively in any way, they are undefeated. Unfortunately, they are playing a Detroit team that has been red hot and on a roll. Yesterday against the Chargers, the defense had a lot to be desired. They gave up 38 points. And Justin Herbert was just playing the Justin Herbert special type game where he's just throwing the ball all over the yard. They gave up 200 rushing yards. And it was just an absolutely brutal game defensively for the Lions to have to go through. But in typical Charger choker fashion, they end up on the last drive giving up a 3-minute drive, which allowed Riley Patterson to kick a 41-yard field goal, which is kind of amazing because I think they said he's only had like 1 to 3 kicks outside of 50 yards for his career. But the reason why Detroit won was also they averaged 8.3 yards per play. Only the Cowboys yesterday were able to average that many yards per play on a consistent basis. And I want to shout out David Montgomery for his second longest rush of his career. And to me, this is one of those things to where when you look at the Bears defense, when they've actually had to play a competent offense in a way, they've really looked bad. Or they've shown that they can be had offensively. The Chiefs put up a lot of points on them. The Packers put up a lot of points on them. The Broncos put up over 30 points and a half. And I just think with this Lions offense, look, Amon-Ra St. Brown's had 4 straight games over 100 yards and 5+ receptions. He was fantastic yesterday. Jared Goff, 2 touchdowns, 22 of 33, 223. 4 of 5 on 4th down as well for the Lions against the Chargers. Very key stat for them to be effective. And also, I think with the Bears, they're a running-based team. The Lions have the 3rd best rushing defense in the league in terms of yards. And this is the Lions' best start in 50 years. Which is amazing to think about, but I think 7-2, in my opinion, after last week, I think after yesterday, they had to drop in my own personal NFC rankings to number 4. I think it goes Eagles, Niners, Cowboys, then Lions, and I would have Seattle at the 5, and probably Minnesota at the 6 right now. As my top 6 teams in the NFC. But I just think for the Bears, look, they could get Justin Fields back. They should. He was limited practice. He gets another 10 days. If he is able to play, it makes the game more interesting and competitive. But to be fair, Justin Fields has only had really 2 good games the entire year. And even in the game when he got hurt, he completed like 5 or 6 passes for like 30 yards. And I just don't think against this Lions defense, which is shown to be more effective and consistent in a way playing much more weaker offenses, I think the Lions easily at home host this game and kick the tar out of the Bears, just like they did last time when they were in Chicago last year. In a pretty lopsided game, in my opinion. So, that's all I like Detroit here, -9.5, and Detroit straight up. The next game, the Los Angeles Chargers over the Green Bay Packers. This one, to me, has to be with the Chargers based on the fact that, look, the Chargers, they have Brandon Staley, who I have defended for up until week 2 this year. I thought Brandon Staley wasn't a bad coach. And I honestly thought, a lot of people thought that he should have been fired after the playoff collapse, which the Chokers always seem to do, against Jacksonville, where they had a 20-0 lead. But to me, I thought, okay, he had made the playoffs, and he did get 5 turnovers, and that was an equal thing, and that maybe he could get better. So for all the Brandon Staley critics out there, I apologize, because, look, I gave up on him this year after week 2, after they choked another game, and even though they had blown out the Jets, and they had blown out the Bears, and I told you last week about the 22-6 record, the Chargers, right when you had some confidence, just did what they always do, and they had a competitive, probably one of the more entertaining games of the weekend, and they choke it at the end, because their defense can't stop a nosebleed. The Chargers' 3-point loss was the 13th one of 3 points or fewer over the past 4 seasons. That's the most such loss in the NFL over the last 4 years. And they have the worst passing defense in the entire league, which is amazingly bad. And it's just something to where, like, you have Derwin James, you have Asante Samuel, you have Joey Bosa, you have Khalil Mack, you have Kenneth Murray, you have Eric Kendrick, you have a talented defense. And every week, it's just mind-boggling to see a defense give up that many points. It's very, ironically, USC-ish. To stay in the Southern California way. It's very, where you can watch Justin Herbert, and I think, Justin Herbert right now is a better talent than Caleb Williams. That's a totally different conversation, totally different day. But it's just like, you're watching both those teams, and you're like, man, like, they can, give you every offensive firepower. But they never win, because it's never enough. It is never enough offensive yards and points for the Chargers to win. And I am just going to say this now, Justin Herbert is the AFC version of Kirk Cousins. 58 games this man has played. He has played very good statistical football. And I would argue he's a borderline top 5 talent. But the man always just seems to be on the short end of the stick every single week. And sometimes it's his fault, sometimes it's not. But it's just like, eventually, you just have to look at it and go, we spent over $250 million on an average quarterback that puts up a lot of great numbers and is one of the prettiest losers of all time. And I'm just going to tell you, as someone that loves results, I'll take an ugly winner over a pretty loser any day. And that's what I think Justin Herbert and Kirk Cousins are. They are the pretty losers of the NFL. They will give you perfect, sensational quarterback play from an individual standpoint. But when they go on the bus, here's the L bus, here's the W bus. Which bus most of the time do those quarterbacks usually end up? They usually end up on the L train, on the L bus. And I think it's fair. But fortunately, they're playing a Packer team, which finally showed some life for the first time in several weeks. But the offense has had an issue. The Packers' offense has now scored 20 or fewer points in 7 straight games. And even though, look, I'm going to give Jordan Love his credit. He threw his most passing touchdowns since week 2, but he also threw 2 bad interceptions, which cost them the game. And Aaron Jones, kind of one of the key problems, because I know Christian Watson's dealt with some injuries, and A.J. Dillon's done okay. Aaron Jones, even with his injury, he's not gained more than 75 rushing yards this year. And it's very telling that he took a pay cut or restructured his contract to try to, stay with them and be effective. But, in this game, I just think the Chargers defense, they're playing a quarterback in his, 10th start. And I saw what he did against Zach Wilson. And I saw what he did against Tyson Bagent. And it's very similar in that way to me, where I think the Chargers defense, look, could the Chargers give up a bunch of yards? Sure, they could. And Jordan Love has shown you at times, and he made a couple good passes, especially those touchdowns. My favorite one was the read on the crossing route. That, they can maybe move the ball, but at the end of the day, I'm just going to trust the Chargers because they just have more talent. I think offensively, that's too much for the Packers defense to hold on to. And it'll be a pretty significant moment, because the last time San Diego or Los Angeles Chargers went into Lambeau Field was back in Week 6 of 1984 and won a game in Lambeau. It was October 7th, 1984. So, and I know these teams don't play each other that much, but I just feel like with the Chargers here, it's just a better offensive aspect. And look, the Packers defense is not as good as the Jets defense, so I think Justin Herbert should be able to move the ball a bit more effectively. Eckler should be able to run the ball and catch the ball in a more consistent way. I think with Jair Alexander having shoulder injury, which is big, I think that's going to be key for them to win and move the ball through the air effectively. And I just trust that the Chargers, with their roster, just have too much of a talent gap that I don't think the Packers can respond with a fourth-year quarterback at the helm. So, should be an interesting game. Wouldn't be surprised if the Packers won and made the Chargers go to choking mode again. But I'm going to trust the talent in this one, and that's going with the Chargers. So, that's why I like the Los Angeles Chargers here, -3.5, and the Los Angeles Chargers straight up. The next game, the Miami Dolphins over the Las Vegas Raiders. This is one to where, look, Antonio Pierce, I'm going to shout him out very quickly, is the first interim coach in the last 10 seasons to win back-to-back games as an interim coach, which I thought was very interesting. I saw it on Good Morning Football today. For the last 9 or 10 interim coaches over the last 10 years, they would always win their first game, but they never win their second. So good for Antonio Pierce to do that. The Raiders have 4 straight wins at home after losing the first home game they had against the Pittsburgh Steelers in a bad game by Josh McDaniels. And they played the New York teams, and I know New York teams are both dreadful, but they have, in 24 drives against the New York Giants and Jets, they only allowed 1 offensive touchdown. Josh Jacobs had his first 100-yard game for this season. Also, by the way, when the Raiders run Josh Jacobs 20 or more times this year, they are 4-0 in those games. And I am just going to say this. I love Antonio Pierce a lot. I think he's proven to be a great motivator, very compelling, consistent. And it's very much like Dan Campbell was in the interim, ironically, with the Dolphins a few years ago. Dan Campbell had won a couple games, and he showed some promise, and everybody thought against a good quality team, he didn't need to win, but he didn't need to get blown out. And that's very much how I feel about the Dolphins. Where, look, the Dolphins, they held the Chiefs without a touchdown in the second half of their last game, which I thought went under the radar of how bad the offense has been. And fortunately, the team, in the 3 games that they played, where they played 500 teams or better, they've averaged 17 points a game. In the 6 games where they played 500 teams or worse, they've averaged 39 points a game. I don't think the Raiders defense, with some of the talent they had and the confidence they played with, they're not going to give up 39 points. I just don't see, with Aiden O'Connell, with Ramsey and Howard back there. Ramsey and Howard held the Chiefs and Mahomes to his lowest passing yardage total of the year, which I thought was incredibly impressive. I just think it's one of those things to where I just think the Dolphins have enough in them with their defensive backs, with the pass rush that the Dolphins have, and with the offense that they have, with Tyreek Hill being the NFL's leading receiver. I just think it's too much for this Raiders defense to go on. They've lost 7 of 9 to the Dolphins overall with the Raiders, and I just believe in the Dolphins' offense enough that I don't think the Raiders can match. Like, the Raiders beat up the Giants, but the Giants were a shell of themselves, and the Jets are a inept offensive team. And so I think the Dolphins are that great combination of the Giants couldn't do anything, and the Jets had a good defense. I think the Dolphins have a good enough defense and a better offense that I don't think Aiden O'Connell in his 2 games where, I don't think he'll be able to match the scoring, because I do think for the Raiders, they would have to put up at least 28 in that game to be somewhat competitive, to make it close. I don't think that happens, and I think the Dolphins win. But I would say this, just based on the Dolphins coming off a bye. McDaniel has done fairly well off a bye throughout his career. And I just like where the Dolphins are in this kind of spot against a surging Raider team that has some false confidence. I just think for Antonio Pierce to keep his job, I think he needs to be able to cover the spread. If he loses by over 10, that's going to be kind of one of those points to where Mark Davis can say, well, look, he's great and he's motivational and all that stuff. But when he had a genuine, team that was a genuine team, in our opinion, we got our rear ends kicked and it wasn't even close. So it's not where Antonio Pierce needs the win, in my opinion, outright. He just needs to make it look competitive. Because honestly, I felt like when Dan Campbell played the Patriots and he got blown out, that was the moment for the Dolphins where they knew, okay, Dan Campbell might not have been the guy at that time. So, should be an interesting game. I think the Dolphins coming rested off a bye at home with the offense they have, the lack of talent the Raiders have in the secondary as much. Also, they might have lost to Meek Robertson, in the game last week or yesterday. I think the Dolphins easily and hold on to, easily get a 10-point win here and show that the Raiders, Antonio Pierce is a great guy, great motivator. Would love to have him as a defensive coordinator, and I do think he deserves the right to have an interview, but I do think that Mark Davis will pause after this game just because I think the Raiders, nobody's going to expect them to win, but I don't even expect the Raiders to compete in this game from what I've seen from both teams this year so far, even in Antonio Pierce's interim stint. So that's all I like Miami here, -10, and Miami straight up. The next game, the Washington Commanders over the New York Giants. This is one to where the New York Giants right now, after everything that's going on, are the worst team in the league. They gave up the second most yards in franchise history, 640. Only in 1948 against Chicago Bears did they give up more total yards. And it was the worst point differential in a divisional series since the 2007 Patriots. And they ended up losing 89-17. Think about that. 89-17. That is just brutal. Pathetic. Inept. It's the second worst third down and offensive percentage. Also, the Giants' injuries just keep piling up. No Kayvon Thibodeau, Jalen Hyatt, Deontay Banks, and I forgot the other, or Flott. Yeah, I forget his first name. But they all left the game with injuries, and it's just, this team is just so bad. And it's something to where, look, even though, here's a fun fact, okay? Tommy DeVito, the man that grew up in the Soprano neighborhood of Cedar Grove, New Jersey, where they filmed The Sopranos, has more passing touchdowns this year than Daniel Jones. And by the way, he's a better quarterback than Malik Willis. But sorry to keep bailing, but I had to shout out Tommy DeVito, better than Malik Willis, one of the worst draft picks in quarterbacking in a long time, Malik Willis. But that, like, think about it. Tommy DeVito has shown more life. He's shown more life than the Jets offense. But I'll get that in a second. But it's like, when you look at this game with the Giants and Commanders, look, they played each other a few weeks ago with Tyrod, and they were able to win the game 14-7 because the Commanders' offensive line collapsed. But this is Tommy DeVito. Sam Howell, who is playing very good football, he has the most completions and attempts and the most passing yards in the league this year. Who would have thought Sam Howell, the fifth rounder out of UNC? And I have to give Eric Bieniemy some credit. He has improved that offense to a league average offense. It is doubled in production in terms of points and yards. They were 24th last year in points and yards. They're now 16th in an average offense. And the problem for the Commanders has been they have been a 500 team in one-score games. They've had a lot of moments to where Sam Howell will make a few plays here or there, but it's just not enough. Or the defense just collapses, or there's just one or two mistakes that they just seem not to be able to make, or plays not be able to make. I do want to shout out Brian Robinson as well. 157 scrimmage yards yesterday and a receiving touchdown. But the other problem that they had that I don't think they're going to have this time around is Washington, since they traded Montez Sweat and Chase Young, they have only gotten one sack in the 2 games since they traded 2 of their better pass rushers away, because they really don't have any outside pass rushing threats at this point. And look, I'm just going with the Commanders because the Giants, they just look sad. The Giants just look, like the worst team in the league. And until they can prove otherwise, and I'm not saying the Giants are going to get blown out every game, but I'm probably going to pick against the Giants the rest of the year because they're that bad. And the Commanders, for as much as I may not like Ron Rivera and Del Rio and think that they might clean the whole house due to the new ownership, they're better than the Giants. They were better than the Giants a couple weeks ago, and they're definitely better than the Giants today, especially with Tommy DeVito at the helm. It is going to be an absolute beatdown at home with that defense. And I just think, if you take the Giants, maybe not just believing that the Giants, but with the defensive injuries, maybe no Thibodeau, maybe it's just going to be a long night or a long afternoon for the Washington Commanders. Or, I'm sorry, a long night for the New York Giants in Washington, just with where both these teams are. So, but that's why I like Washington here, -10, and Washington straight up. The next game, the Dallas Cowboys over the Carolina Panthers. Not much to say here, folks. The Panthers suck. They're the second worst team in the league. They can't really score anything offensively. Frank Reich's a bum. Frank Reich has been an overrated coach for years. Okay, he doesn't understand analytics because he tried to sell to the Charlotte media that you should have made Eddie Pinheiro kick a 59-yard field goal, though his career long was 56. And he said, well, you had a 30% chance of making a field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 10. Well, no, you didn't. You liked, thanks to the NFL Next Gen stats, maybe he didn't have those or not, the NFL Next Gen stats said Eddie Pinheiro had a 21% chance to make a 59-yard field goal in Chicago, or going for it on 4th and 10, according to your words, was 30. So 30-21, I can do math. You should have gone for it on 4th down. The injuries to Brian Burns and Henderson, are a problem. The Cowboys just keep rolling. CeeDee Lamb had 3 straight games, 150 yards and 10 plus more receptions. The Cowboys have just steamrolled bad teams, and I don't even really think it's going to be a contest. Could the Panthers, maybe it's a road game, but the Panthers fans are disgusted. Cowboy fans are going to travel, and I guarantee you that crowd is going to be 65 to 70% Cowboy fans going to Charlotte. And the Panthers are just going to get another foghorn, leghorn type butt kicking for the old cartoon meme that in this game. Could the Panthers be competitive? Maybe. I doubt it. But I just think the Panthers are a inept franchise with a bum of a coach that's an offensive mind and a GM that needs to get fired. But the Cowboys just roll easily into the game. So sorry for the lack of analysis, but there's not much to talk about the Cowboys. Just not. So that's like Dallas here, -11, Dallas straight up. The next game, the Jacksonville Jaguars over the Tennessee Titans. This is one to where, look, the Tennessee Titans are at their worst start since 2015 at 3-6. They had their second lowest amount of rushing yards, which was, I thought, key in the last week. The reason why I took Tampa to win. And Will Levis, after that phenomenal game against the Falcons, he has not thrown a touchdown in the last 2 games. And he's been sacked 8 times. So he's definitely showing that the hype around Levis, where he might have the most potential, and has good traits that you like, it's definitely not bending the needle very much in a young, or I would even argue, definitely not Stroud, but not even, I would say, a Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson type level of effectiveness. Where okay, Will might have had just that one lucky moment. But the last 2 weeks, it has not been great. It's really bad because Kyle Phillips was their leading receiver yesterday. It wasn't Hopkins, it was Kyle Phillips, some random white guy that nobody knows. And also, here's the other problem with the Titans. Fun fact here. The Titans have scored only 2 offensive touchdowns the whole year on the road. Even though I know the London game too, so maybe 3. So 3 if you count that on the road, even though they were the home team. But on the genuine road, the Titans have only scored 2 offensive touchdowns. That is pathetic. And I like Mike Vrabel as a person, and I think Mike Vrabel is a good coach, but I do think it is time for the Titans to consider at the end of this year firing Mike Vrabel, because it's not going to get a lot better. They're going to be at a spot where they have 3 wins. They may not get that number 1 pick by any means, and I just think it's going to just be a tough moment. But here's the crazy thing about the Jags, okay? And the reason why I'm going to the Jags is the Titans are a below 500 team. The Jaguars at home this year against above 500 teams. These are all genuine stats I piled up thanks to Sports Reference, okay? They are 0-3 in those games, and they have averaged under 10 points a game, under 300 yards a game, and have committed 7 turnovers. They have scored 1 offensive touchdown in those 3 games against teams above 500 at home. They have been better on the road. When they were in London, they were better against Buffalo and Pittsburgh on the road, which is amazing to think about. But it really does kind of tell you with Jacksonville that they might have a little bit more of a fraudulence than you think, to where, again, I think Baltimore, I still think you could put Jacksonville at 4 as the 4th best team in the AFC, and they're going to win. And just to be fair, they might lose that division just due to how the Houston Texans are playing. But, so that's what I'm saying. So the Jags at home, they haven't been great, but against below 500 teams and against bad teams in their division, they have played very well. And I just think they continue to roll with that against the Titan team that has had some moments and is trying to show some flashes. But overall, I just haven't seen enough to be convinced that there's enough there for that flash to be made against a Titan team that is kind of on the spiraling end of not making the playoffs once again. So, should be an interesting game. But again, Jacksonville ticked off after a loss. They usually play pretty well the next week after they lose in a tough spot. And I believe the Jags hold on and win the game, at least by a touchdown, against a reeling Titans team. So that's all like Jacksonville, -6.5, and Jacksonville straight up. The next game, the Houston Texans over the Arizona Cardinals. Shout out to Kyler Murray for winning his first game in 335 days. And the Cardinals defense were playing the immortal duo of Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder and holding them to 70 total passing yards, which is the fewest total passing yards the Cardinals have held an opponent since Week 14 of the 2020 season. And I thought the Cardinals, they showed a lot of life and they showed a lot of zest playing against an inept quarterback and an inept coach with a better quarterback. Unfortunately, this time around, they are not playing the Falcons. They are playing the Texans, who have right now earned themselves an outright playoff spot if the season ended today. That's right. The Buffalo Bills and Cincinnati Bengals would not make the playoffs, and the Houston Texans would. Who would have had that on their 2023 NFL bingo card? And all the Texan fans are telling you, put that in your bullhorn and smoke it. And I think that is primarily due to the fact of Mr. C.J. Stroud. He is the best quarterback from Ohio State University since the undrafted quarterback Mike Tomczak, and he's the best drafted quarterback they've ever had. He has the 3rd most wins for an Ohio State quarterback ever already. Only Mike Tomczak and I forgot the other name. But there was another Ohio State quarterback that had 12 wins. He was 12-25. But he has the 3rd most wins already. And the biggest reason has been Stroud, who is, I think, in the MVP conversation. He's the Rookie of the Year, but he has to be in the MVP conversation now. I don't think he's the front runner, but he has to be in there. But it's also crazy because Devin Singletary, who was also ran to the Buffalo Bills, had a career high in rushing yards, and Noah Brown had a career high in receiving yards. He's in back-to-back weeks. He had over 170 yards. The Texans also put up their most offensive yards in a very long time. And when you look at this Texans-Cardinals game, this is the thing where, look, I genuinely believe, as I told you last week, the Cardinals are going to win because of Kyler Murray just being the better quarterback than whatever Heineke and Ridder were. This time around, knowing how good the Texans have been and knowing how tough the Cardinals have kind of shown you. And again, do I think the Cardinals can compete? Sure. But this Texans team is legit. They're getting players back healthy. They should get the offensive line hopefully back together soon. Hopefully Dameon Pierce comes back. Like they're gonna get better because they're gonna bring in more talent. But at just this moment, I am gonna trust C.J. Stroud and that Texans roster from top to bottom in D'Amico over another rookie coach in Jonathan Gannon. Could Kyler win this game? Sure. Look, the Texans 3 weeks ago lost to the Carolina Panthers, which is crazy. The only one the Carolina Panthers had was against a winning Texan team. But in this regard, I just think the Texans have more momentum, have a better quarterback playing, have more talent, and I just feel like the Texans are in a better position to play a more consistent and decisive game than the Arizona Cardinals will. I think Arizona could beat them because I think Kyler could provide some havoc to a Texan defense, which at times this year has shown some vulnerability. But I think Houston being at home, the confidence of what they have, D'Amico being the better coach, having the better roster in most ways besides kicker, will win the day for the Texans and get them to a 6-4 start or 6-4 record, which is incredibly insane, knowing what my expectations for the Texans were this year. So that's why I like Houston here, -5.5, and Houston straight up. The next game, the San Francisco 49ers over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Look, I'm going to give Tampa their credit. They ended their 4-game losing streak, and they've had 3 games now where they've held the opponent to rushing offense to 40 or fewer yards, and they are now 4-1 when they score 20 or more points. But this time around, look, the Niners have played incredibly well, been consistent. They have a top 3 offense and defense in the league this year. Christian McCaffrey, for the first time in 18 to 19 games, did not score a touchdown, which was incredibly surprising. And the Niners defense forced 4 turnovers. And in 3 games where the Niners have gotten 4+ sacks on defense, they have given up less than a touchdown a game. So they are definitely key on the defensive line generating a good amount of pressure. I am not saying that the Bucs offensive line will give that up, even though the Bucs offensive line has had its tough moments. I just think with that Niners defense, as effective as it is, I think that run defense will effectively limit Rachaad White. And I think with Baker in his moments, I think he's going to have a very tough day against a rejuvenated Niners team. And I've seen the Bucs defense at times. Stroud was able to dice them up pretty well. Look, Stroud's played better than Purdy this year. But I think Brock Purdy, when he's had his whole complement of weapons, he has 15 touchdowns to 5 interceptions this year. 3 of those interceptions were in 4 of those interceptions were in 3 games where they all weren't healthy. So if you take out that idea, he's like 12 TDs to 1 interception in the games where they've all been together. And I think that's the reason why the Niners win at home. The Bucs going out to the West Coast is going to be a tough little road split for them. Though they split the last 4 games, the Niners and Bucs have, I think the Niners have a better defensive line. They'll limit the running game and put more on Baker's shoulders. And I think even though the Niners secondary isn't phenomenal, I think that the Niners overall team fully healthy will be able to generate enough offensively and push the line of scrimmage with Williams leading it to win the game. But that's why I like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here, +10.5, but the San Francisco 49ers straight up. The next game, the Buffalo Bills over the New York Jets. This is one to where, look, the Jets have gone 11 quarters without scoring an offensive touchdown, 36 straight possessions, and over the last 5 games, they have gone 1 of 14 in the red zone. Zach Wilson is the first Jets quarterback to have 250+ passing yards, 50+ rushing yards in a game. And unfortunately, since even with some of the offensive improvement, they have scored lower. They have had lower amount of points and yards of offense this year than last. And look, the Bills are playing a team, and they are playing a team in the Bills that have scored 10 or fewer points after 3 quarters for 5 straight games. They cannot run the ball at all, and Josh Allen for his career is completing 63% of his passes and has 9 touchdowns to 10 interceptions and a 79 quarterback rating playing this Jets defense. I am going to take the Bills to win this game because it's a home game, and the Bills and the Jets under Saleh have not gone into Buffalo and won a game. But I cannot take the Bills with that 7.5 point line, even as bad as the Jets are in this spot. I just can't. And I think the Bills, with that home environment, with the cooling edge, and knowing that they actually have to play Zach Wilson the whole way and actually prepare for him, I think they win the game easily and pretty much knock the Jets out. Any hope of the Jets making the playoffs at this point, you could say it's still at this point now. But I'm going to take the Bills because, again, I trust the home aspect, the more confidence in Josh Allen, and Saleh's never beaten the Bills on the road as my drivers to win. But with the inability of the Bills offense, I'm going to take the Jets plus 7.5 because I do believe that Jets defense can cause havoc. It has caused havoc for Josh Allen throughout his career, which will make this game within one score. So that's why I like the Buffalo Bills here straight up, but the New York Jets plus 7.5. The next game, the Seattle Seahawks over the Los Angeles Rams. The Seattle Seahawks offensively had a season high in terms of offensive yards and passing yards. It's also the first time in 4 games the Seahawks did not commit an offensive turnover, which was massive. They also had Jason Myers, who made the game-winning field goal. Also, quick fun field goal fact, 5 field goals were game winners in the NFL this past week. It's been a very long time since you've had that many games decided by a quick field goal or by a field goal. And they also had the Seattle receivers were fantastic. They had the second most yards after catch in a single game this year. And the Rams have just been mired in injury. And I know they signed Carson Wentz. They were hoping Matthew Stafford gets back. Kyron Williams hopefully will get back as well. I just can't trust, from what I've seen out of the Rams, even in their top moments when they were healthy, I just can't trust them to beat the Seahawks on the road where, the LA environment's not going to be that much of a home field advantage for the Rams. But, I also think Seattle will be motivated because they were stunned in a 30-12 game in week 1. Now as the season's gone on, we've seen that Seattle has been a much better and more consistent team. And I think that will win the day over a Ram team that has had some moments, and I think fully healthy can be effective, but there have been plenty of more bad moments than good for the Rams, even with Stafford fully back. So, so that's why I like Seattle here, minus 2.5, and Seattle straight up. And then the final 2 games, the Minnesota Vikings over the Denver Broncos. This is one where look, Danielle Hunter's leading the league in sacks. The Vikings defense has played better over this last 6-game span. Josh Dobbs has played sensationally. He has completed 63.6% of his passes, 1,995 yards, 11 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. I'm glad for him, too, because he got his first 2 career wins as a quarterback. And they have now forced 2 or more turnovers in 4 of their last 6 games, though their biggest problem has been their running offense. They are the 3rd worst rushing offense in the league. Denver's defense has played better over the last few weeks. And Russell Wilson has played well throughout the season, 16 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. But it's just one of those things to where the Vikings have found a roll. The Vikings have been on a good roll. And I just think, again, I'm not going to keep betting against these Vikings. I know what Josh Dobbs is this year. He's playing just as well as Russell Wilson is. And I think the Minnesota Vikings have a clear and fundamentally better team all the way around than the Broncos do, maybe besides at running. And I just think, again, it's going to be a cool moment because the last time the Vikings went into Denver and won, you have to go back in 1999. And at the end of the day, if you're going to give me Kevin O'Connell with what he's done with the staff and with Josh Dobbs, or Russell Wilson and Sean Payton with the bugaboos of the Denver offense and defense throughout the weeks, I'm going to trust the Vikings to win this game based on the continuity and consistency I've seen with Dobbs over the Denver Broncos. So, it'll be an interesting game. So that's why I like Minnesota here, plus 1.5, and Minnesota straight up. And lastly, the big game of the week, the Kansas City Chiefs over Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have the number 1 run defense. The last 3 games, Jalen Hurts, he's had 8 touchdowns to 1 interceptions. But they've given up the most passing touchdowns this year. And the Eagles got smacked in the 4th quarter by the Cowboys, 146 to 15 yards. And Andy Reid's never lost to the Eagles. And throughout his career, he is 27-4 after a bye week. And the Eagles are playing the number 2 defensive points and 4th in yards. And Mahomes is 21-8 in primetime games with 68 touchdowns and 20 interceptions. And I genuinely believe the Chiefs will find a way to grind out this victory because Andy Reid and Mahomes are a little bit better than Sirianni and Hurts. Should be a phenomenal game, but again, in this spot, go with the more experienced, more proven team at home, and that's the Chiefs. That's why I like KC here, minus 2.5, and KC straight up. But that is it. So those are my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page. And until next week, until the week of Thanksgiving for Americans, this is Matt the NFL Fanatic signing off. Until next time, everyone, so long.